Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan, and I'm honored, so honored, Marsha, to have you as one of my guests for the Influence Continuum podcast. I'd like to start by just telling our listeners a bit about you and your very important work. You are a social worker by training. You have over 40 years of experience in mental health and child welfare, but you are the vice president of the Family Advocacy Division within the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And we like to call it in the biz NCMEC, National
Yes.
Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And this is a very unique entity in DC. I'm going to ask you to explain what makes it so important and so special and how your organization can help serve missing and exploited children. But before we get into
hmm
that, I'll just say that am I correct in remembering that it was actually John Walsh that had something to do with the founding of NCMEC, or am I
hmm
misremembering it?
No, Stephen, thank you so much for for having me.
Sure.
Really happy to be here to talk about the work of the National Center. But no, you're absolutely correct. John and Revé Walsh certainly are founders of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Many of your listeners will probably remember the pretty horrific story of the abduction of Adam Walsh, who was abducted when he was out with his mother
Mm,
at a store, and he was in '81, and he was abducted, and he was later found deceased. And anyone that remembers that will remember, of course, it was horrific. There had been some other missing child cases as well
yep.
during that same time frame. You had Eton Pates in New
Yes.
York. That
Well,
case,
I'm an old fogey. I'm 68, so
yeah,
I do
yeah, well,
remember
yeah,
back to the 80s, but don't assume our listeners are out my age, but
mm-hmm,
even 18 and older kind of thing.
yes, yes,
So
well,
fill us in. So they had this
uh-huh,
horrible incident where their son was kidnapped and was missing, if I remember correctly, for a
yes,
long time before they
yes,
found the
absolutely. He was,
killer. And wasn't
yes,
John Walsh, he went on to do America's Most Wanted, and he
yes,
got a tremendous amount of attention through to his work helping law enforcement find bad people by
yeah,
crowdsourcing, information about perpetrators, if
yes,
I'm
yes,
remembering correctly. But please continue
yes.
with.
You're correct in all of that. This was also during the time when we had the Atlanta child murders that were happening in Atlanta as well. And for those in your audience that would not remember that, that was a time when you had African American,
Hmm.
children,
Hmm.
primarily males, that were being abducted and then later found murdered. So it seemed that the country was at a place where we were seeing so much harm come to so many of our children.
Yep.
John and Revé Walsh were absolutely adamant that another family should not have to experience what they went through.
Hmm.
To that end, they were very successful in working with their senator at the time, Senator Paula Hawkins,
Hmm.
who was here,
Hmm.
and talking to her and certainly her staff. They were very instrumental in getting legislation passed
Right.
as
When
the
you say
years went
here,
on.
you mean
In the
Washington,
Washington
D.C.
D.C., yeah, on the Hill,
Right.
it's right,
Okay.
getting legislation passed
Good.
that really put the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children into, put us here, and that was in 1984.
Wow. So this is what an amazing accomplishment. Thank you, John and Reve. And I had minimal interaction with John Walsh, but he asked me to be an expert when on his daytime talk show, which was in
Yes,
addition to America's Most Wanted, when Elizabeth Smart was
Yes.
found, and
Mm-hmm.
they asked me if there was a former client of mine and their child that might be willing to go on the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was quite an extraordinary, session with footage of Elizabeth saying, I'm not Elizabeth. I'm not who you think I am. And the cop has the picture of her next to her face. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
you got to come with us. We got to
Yeah.
go down to the police station.
Yes.
And then the whole cult mind control programming story eventually came out,
Mm-hmm.
and the smarts have become incredible advocates for other children.
And indeed, they have, and going back when we go back to the founding of the National Center, John and Revé, they're out there. John was on the Hill all the time, and then
Yeah,
putting other people around him, that were able to make sure that this could come to pass, so that there would be this building as
yeah,
they envisioned in Washington D.C. That would be the children's building, a place where families that were experiencing this, these horrific crimes would be able to come, including the kind of crime that occurred with Elizabeth,
yeah,
with so many other missing kids that we have seen along some very long term, and some, of course, anytime a child's gone, if even if it's just for a week, that's a long time,
right. But what's
to be
so
missing.
special about this vision that you are now vice president of the Family Advocacy
Hmm.
Division of, was my, and correct me if I'm not remembering this correctly, but you have in your building an FBI agent, an immigration person. You have like a complex system approach to, if somebody calls and said, I'm worried about this child, there's kind of an in-house network of people who can help and
Um,
assist.
yeah, Stephen, you're correct. We're very fortunate to be able to have federal law enforcement, professionals that are based here with us. Our office is located in Alexandria,
Hmm.
Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
And of course, these individuals, these professionals are working alongside of us on cases of missing children, on cases of what we now call child sexual abuse
Hmm.
material, or
Hmm.
CSAM, what the public would know as child pornography, in
Hmm.
those kinds of cases. And it really does we find that it takes a real comprehensive approach
Right.
to be able to stop some of what we unfortunately have been seeing over the years
Yeah.
with crimes against children.
And this is so important because my sense is that there's so many caring, well-intentioned, resourced people, but they're in their own silos addressing social problems with trafficked kids or whatever. But this is a very unique nonprofit.
It's very comprehensive.
Hmm.
When we started in 1984, I was fortunate to be one of those individuals, one of those first 40,
Yeah.
that were hired to come to Washington D.C.
Yes.
to be able to stand up this organization that had never been put into place. It was very exciting. It was very rewarding to be able
Yep.
to see, to build it, to make a determination as to what was going to be important to families, what should we be doing. Back then, law enforcement, of course, didn't know who we were.
Right.
They did not know who we were. You're reaching out to law enforcement on a missing child case, and they're like, well, wait a minute, who are you, and what are you
Right.
doing?
Are you legit?
Yes, all of that.
Yeah.
And of course, as the years have progressed, we have just been so successful in being able to bridge that gap,
Right.
between us and law enforcement, and other nonprofits that you have mentioned that are doing this kind of work as well. When you talk about other organizations that are doing the work, the bulk of them are going to be in the community. They're going to be, on the ground. They're going to be able to go out and meet families and do that kind of work. Because we are considered a clearinghouse,
Yeah.
as it were, we do our work here. We do our work here at headquarters that's located here again in Alexandria, Virginia,
Right.
but we do have an office in Rochester,
Hmm.
New York. We have one in Austin. and we have one in Florida, in the Lake Worth area of Florida. So that's where the bulk of our work is taking place. When a family calls into us, we have a 24/7 call center, 365 days a
With
year.
an 800 number, if I remember.
Yes, and it's 1-800-843-5678 or
Hmm.
1-800 the lost.
The Lost.
The
That's
lost.
easier to remember.
Yes, right. THELOST.
Mm.
And when those calls come in to the call center staff, then they're going to be coming from law enforcement. They're going to be coming from parents
Yep.
whose child, who are there having a situation with the child. It could be from illegal, professionals, educators, anybody that has an issue related to a missing and or exploited child. That case is then intake. It's going to either go to our missing child division
Hmm.
or our exploited child division. We
Okay.
also have an analytical division, and of course, you have our family advocacy division. And so at that point, that's where they're making the determination as to where that case is going to be going to and what group of case managers or analysts are going to be managing and doing the work on that case.
I didn't realize you had other offices around the country, so
Yes.
that's new information for me.
Hmm.
I'm very happy to hear about that. Could you walk us through like what kinds of cases, if people are listening to this,
Okay,
would
yes.
be appropriate to reach out to your office?
Yes, we handle what we call family abduction cases, or that's a case where most of the public knows that as a parental abduction,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. It can be anybody that is a guardian, to a child that
Mm-hmm.
has abducted that child, and that can be either domestically
Yeah.
or internationally.
Mm.
And when speaking of internationally, we also work very closely with the Office of Children's Issues with the State Department
Ah.
on many of those cases. It can be a case of an endangered runaway. We classify all children as who have left on their own as endangered, because oftentimes people assume, well, they left on their own, so that must be something that they wanted to do. Regardless, they're still in danger and they're not where they're supposed to be. So they really run into high risk of victimization when they are out and about.
Yeah. So is there an age cutoff? Like children is under 18 or is it 21 or what?
We go to the age of 18. There are special situations or circumstances where we can intake the case of a young person up to the age of 21 when they have extenuating circumstances.
Like
But
if they're on the autism spectrum or have
yes,
some
yes,
other
or
mental
and some
health?
other disability, yes,
Yes. Uh-huh.
and things of that nature. So yes, we can do that.
Hmm.
The other cases that we have on the exploitation side are going to be the cases, as you mentioned earlier. They're going to be those cases where there's suspected trafficking
Yeah.
of a child, those cases where we know for sure that children are being exploited online,
Yep.
where we have sextortion, kinds of cases, where we have online enticement of cases, and those are going to go to our exploited child division. And those again are the cases where the analysts are going to be working with that particular individual calling in, and they're going to be getting that information, making that report, and adding value
Mm-hmm.
to that report that will then be sent to local and or federal law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I really want the listeners to know is that, because we've just been talking about this week,
Right.
there are so many cases of children that are being victimized online. I mean, a lot. And,
Yes.
and I think people would be shocked to know that the ages can be very young,
Well, we know
very,
traffickers want to recruit 12 to 14-year-olds.
yes, they can be very young.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are lots of bad folks out there that are encouraging young people to do things online.
including radicalizing them, if which is my field.
Well, exactly,
Yeah.
of a sexual nature.
I see.
That is what we're seeing more of. The sexual, sexual things like, let's have you do this, and
Like
then I'll do this.
sexting, take a picture of
Um,
your naked
yes,
picture or
and doing, masturbation and things of that
uh-huh.
nature. Now, oftentimes these young people are feeling that maybe they're peer to peer,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe they've met a girl online, or maybe they've met a boy online, and they think this is somebody that they may be engaged in a relationship with.
Yep.
And we all know, young people can be impulsive and what have you, but it does not mean that they obviously doesn't mean that they're bad kids or
Right.
anything like that. They
Bad
found them.
choices.
That's right. They're being coerced
Yeah.
to do this.
Deceived and
Yes,
coerced.
absolutely. To do these kinds of, yes, you're absolutely right. To do these kinds of things. It is traumatic.
Yeah.
It is absolutely traumatic, because what we're seeing now is the sextortion piece is really, really escalated too.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you do this, then your pictures are going to be going to your parents. I'm going to send them to your school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Your life is going to be ruined. And we've had young people commit suicide as a
Mm-hmm.
result of these kinds of crimes, not understanding that there are things that can be done. So what I want the audience to know is,
Yep.
if you know a child, or you have a young person that has found themselves in a situation where they feel like they've made a mistake and taken a picture, or there's something out there and they think it's going to be there forever,
Yep.
that is no longer the case. There are technologies in place now
Mm.
where that information and that kind of material can be removed
Oh,
from
great.
the, yes, tech
That's good
companies.
news.
It's good news, and we're able to help facilitate that kind of removal. So we really, really are trying to get that message out, because parents probably believe that as well, but definitely the kids believe it.
So I need to ask you, I'm trying to imagine a listener.
Mm-hmm.
When they call, is it anonymous or do they have to give their name and their identifying things first of all? Or do they have to be the parent of a child, or could they be the aunt or the uncle or a grandparent?
All of the above. Actually, you'd be surprised. We get lots of calls from kids,
Yeah, so
from
so
teens.
so I want to just before you go on say
Mm-hmm.
if you're young and have had problems, know you're not alone. What Marcia is saying is you're not alone. This is an epidemic that's happening to young people today where they're being preyed upon by bad actors and traffickers and
Yes,
right?
that's exactly what I'm saying. And so they are not alone, and we want to encourage them. Do call. Now, when they call, if it's a minor, when it's a minor that calls,
Yep.
one of the things that my division is going to be doing, because in family advocacy, because we are social workers and counselors and have that kind of background,
Yep.
we're going to be reaching back out to them, and we're going to be encouraging them always, always, always to tell a parent. We
Uh-huh.
really need them to tell a parent, or parents. We really, really needed them to do that. They're
Hmm.
always very upset and very embarrassed and very ashamed, and feeling worthless and all of those kinds of things. And we want them to tell their parents, because what we find, in spite of the fact that no parent would want to see their child go through this, the parents are supportive.
Yep.
They understand how these kinds of things can happen, and then they get that support, because they need that support as well. We are then going to work to make sure that that family and child can receive the kind of counseling that they need within their community to move forward from the crime.
So awesome. So I just for further clarification, if a young person calls you underage, they'll be speaking with what, one of your case manager
They would be
people?
first contacting our call center and the cyber tip line piece. They would be doing a cyber tip line report.
So
So
that's a
they're
different than the lost
no,
number, or that's,
it's all the same.
I see.
It yes, it is all the same, but they would just be taking what we call a cyber tip line report,
Got it.
which means that it's a a technology facilitated
Got it.
crime.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be getting a name, hopefully a telephone number and a way to reach them so that we can reach back out to them.
All right.
The case information is then going to go to our exploited child division
Mm-hmm.
that works with the law enforcement and is going to be working on that case because it's always those cases, like that are breaking the law.
Uh-huh. So if I'm a minor and I realize I've got myself into a heap of trouble and haven't told my family yet, I call
Mhm.
this number. They take my information. I'm being encouraged to call or ask my parent, tell my parents about it. Does your case people ever offer to do the call for the young person or with the young person to kind of be a mediator, or is that?
That is a great question, Stephen. Absolutely. Again, here in the Family Advocacy Division, we always offer that. We will be on the telephone with you. We will explain who we are, and we will, kind of tamp down that immediate, like, oh my gosh, this is the scary stuff for a parent, and we'll be there with you when you tell your parents. Then we can let the parent know what's going to happen next.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. I can't help myself but also ask in this pandemic or post-pandemic age that we're in, do you ever do video calls too, or is it just auditory phone messages to your
Right now, it's
contacts?
still just been auditory,
Uh-huh.
right now. And of course, we always want to keep in touch to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the family is connected because
Uh-huh.
see, law enforcement is going to be connecting with them too as well. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to have that it's important for us to explain to the child who's always
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, am I going to be in trouble? Well, no, you're not going to be in trouble. There's some adult out here that's that's got you in a situation, and let the parent know, because when law enforcement comes knocking on the door, they're going to want to sit down
Sure.
and have a conversation. But it also provides security for
Sure.
that child to know that, okay, this was a bad person that was trying to or had me do bad things, and they're going to have to deal with that through the
Yeah,
legal
but the
system.
fact that it's happening on such an epidemic level, it would be so much more powerful for a professional like one of your people to explain
Yes,
that to the parents and reassuring to the young person.
absolutely. Because you can imagine, you just imagine hearing this kind of stuff, or no, it's out there, that it's happening, but then you find out that somebody has taken advantage of your child
Yep.
in a
So I,
a very horrible way.
so I need to ask you this also because I'm a cult expert and
Yes,
we've consulted on a few cases over the
yes.
years together, but do you get calls from young people who were raised in cults that want to leave, but their parents are still in the cult and they
It
have
really,
nowhere to go and no resources? I'm just curious.
we haven't had that, Stephen, but over the years, you and I have had the conversation. Our conversation is about when we back up and go over to family abduction cases.
Yep.
Family abduction cases are very complex, really
Yes.
complex, really complicated. And I've been doing this work for a really, really long period of time.
Yep.
And what I can say with certainty is this: an individual that would abduct their child thinks about him or herself.
Yeah.
A parent,
Narcissists, in other words.
a parent that will not take their child thinks about the child first. Will
Yep.
always put the needs of the child first, always put. So I say that to say this: we oftentimes, and so if a parent is abducting a child, well, what are they telling the child? Why can't I see mom anymore? Why can't I see dad? Why can't I see my grandparents? Why can't I see my friends at school? What's going on here? So that means a story has to be told.
Yep.
There has to be a story that we call it the abduction story.
Yep.
And there's always an abduction story. And the
Yep.
abduction story can include, somebody died, or they no longer wanted you, or they harmed you.
Yeah, false accusations of
Yes.
abuse made up,
And
to
so and so it's a child. So
Yep.
why would you not believe what your abductor or your parent that you
Right.
love is telling you? So when we have those kind of narratives,
Yep.
being told to the child, and those kind of beliefs that occur over, and they can occur very short in a short period of time, as
Yep.
you know, as the expert in this.
Yep.
But when you have a real long period of time in particular, that's what the child believes. And it's really interesting because you have to peel all of that back when
Yeah.
when the child's recovering. So I do see, when you talk about the belief systems
Yes.
that can be ingrained in a child that's taken by a parent, people would not believe how detrimental and how
Oh,
harmful
it's
that
awful.
is.
And so there's this term called parental alienation that's been used to describe the abducting parents or the custodial
Mhm,
parents brainwashing, for lack of a more technical term, mind controlling their child
mhm.
against the other parent, but not just the other parent, their whole side of the family,
Right, right.
right? And I actually did an interview with a young woman who was alienated from her mother at age 4 by her father. And later on, she and her sister tracked down the mother to hear her side of the story, but they
Mhm,
were
mhm.
married, in their 20s or 30s already. It was horribly traumatic because they lost contact with their whole mother's side of the family. And it turned out the mother left because the father was abusing her.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, right.
And they
They,
didn't
they're it's
know it was a vacuum.
they just didn't know the story. And of course, parental alienation is very controversial. It's a very controversial
Not for
term.
me, it
Yeah, I
isn't.
know. But it's been over the years in the UK. It's not. But it seems like the UK, and I mean here in the US, it is. But one thing we know for sure, there's definitely something that goes on. There's
Yeah,
definitely something that happens. Yeah,
there are
there's
now
something that happens.
measures that can be done by expert witnesses, psychiatrists, psychologists on, check off the things about your mom, check off the things about your dad that really show scientifically if someone's been programmed against
Well,
the other.
we know it's estrangement for sure.
Yeah.
We definitely know that it is estrangement. But you're absolutely right. The trauma cannot be overemphasized. And again, when I talk about
Yeah.
having to peel back the belief systems, and one of the and it's really traumatic when an individual does become an adult
Yes.
and wants to learn, wants to reach back out, and they find that parent that perhaps in all cases love them
Yeah.
may no longer be here.
Yep.
They may be deceased,
Yes.
and that's a whole nother because they
Yeah.
never got a chance to connect or to put a period behind
Yep.
their
Yep.
relationship. So those are really they're real tough cases. They're
Right.
real tough cases.
So I want to add that my introduction to the idea of parental
Hmm.
alienation
Hmm.
goes back
Uh-huh.
45 years
Uh-huh.
to cults,
To shorten our
religious
ages.
cults.
Yes.
But because if you're in one of these closed system groups
Hmm.
and one of the parents wants to leave because they don't have faith anymore in the cult
Right,
leader
right.
or whatever, and then the one that's still in the cult will often be advised to get lost inside the
Yes.
cult with the children and then make up stories against the parent that wants to leave because they're an apostate,
Hmm.
air
Hmm.
quotes, or they're evil, or make up stories about them. So for me, that was my introduction to the group systemic programming against any
Yeah.
former member.
Right, right.
And if you're a former member, happen to be a parent, they want to keep your kids under their spell and not have you have the child have the freedom to choose what they want to
Yes.
believe or where they
Yes.
want to live. So
Yes.
that was my initial introduction. It was
Hmm.
only later that I learned about the phenomenon of just, parents divorcing and
Right.
one of them feeling personally insulted with narcissistic injury or whatever, and wanting to punish the other,
Hmm.
the ex-spouse, etc. And the kids are in the middle.
Oh my gosh, yes, they are so right in the middle. After over the many years of doing this work, I can tell you, I have only met one taking parent,
Mm,
one that said to me what I did was wrong.
yeah,
In all of these years of
that's fascinating, but it
mhm,
it confirms
mhm,
my
yeah,
experiential
yes,
life work as well. But people are learning organisms, and we
right,
depend on the information coming to us to make
yes,
sense of the world. And
right,
if you limit someone's information flow and you don't get to hear another side of the story from other sources, most people will believe utter nonsense. Things like, your grandfather raped you when you were 2, and you find out grandpa died before you were born,
yeah.
and people shouldn't have memories
Mhm.
before 3 or 4 of,
And with
of you know
and that's right. And with children, they're dependent.
right.
They're dependent on that parent that has taken them. So it's we've seen a lot of painful. We also help facilitate reunifications.
Talk
Um,
about that,
yes, we
please.
do. But the thing that we have learned
Hmm.
over the course of it'll be 38 years, this year for the organization. When we first started, we didn't know, we kind of were learning, we had the backgrounds in terms of educational background, but to be able to immerse ourselves in this work, we always were very excited when there was a child that was recovered, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
We would celebrate. And 2 or 3 weeks in, we get a call from a parent. This was generally in the parental abduction side,
Yeah.
family abduction side, that was saying, "Oh my, my child's regressing. My child's afraid. My child
Yeah.
doesn't want me to go to work." And we were thinking, "Oh boy, there's so much more to this than we recognize."
Yeah.
So we realized that we've got to figure out a way when a child has been taken and might be afraid to go
Yeah.
back to this parent that's been vilified.
Sure.
We've got to figure out a way so they're not re-traumatized.
Yep.
They cannot be re-traumatized. So we know that by doing reunifications, and what that means is we prepare if we know a child's going to be recovered,
Yep.
whether it be it internationally or domestically, we're going to be working with that the searching parent
Hmm.
is the way we term it, to provide him or her with what they can expect, what they may see,
Hmm.
how they need to behave, bringing pictures if they have pictures of the child from the time that they were with them,
Yep.
bringing toys, doing things that can help their recall, teaching them not to just run up and throw their arms around the child.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yes,
Because the
things of
parents traumatized,
yes,
worried about their loved one and have
they're
all kinds of stories going on in their heads
yeah.
that they may not have accurate information.
So we have to do that. Then we have generally a therapist
Hmm.
that's going to be meeting with the child.
Hmm.
The child's coming through the airport. We're going to want to get that person there
Yeah.
to meet with that child, to be able to take him or her to the side, do some work with them.
This is the therapist that's meeting with the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
child before
Prior,
seeing.
yes, prior
Got it.
to reconnecting with that searching parent.
I love your
So,
work. I love this
thank you.
work. It's so needed.
Yeah, well, it's important not to just, okay, now you got to cope with this person that you don't know,
Right.
any longer. Then, of course, always setting up ongoing,
Hmm.
intervention for the family. But again, we have to minimize that as much as we can, minimize that that trauma.
Minimize the
So
trauma and normalize that everybody's got feelings, and
mhm.
you got to give yourself a lot of tender, loving care to give you
Yeah, yeah.
space to absorb the changes.
Absolutely. And the other thing that we do as well, that because I know when people are hearing this, they think, oh, wow, you're just taking the child from one parent to the other parent. So now we're back in the same situation. But that's not the goal.
Right.
Our goal is to work as hard as we can to ensure that that child is going to have a caring, loving relationship with both parents.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's a reason, be it, there's some reason that there's
Yep.
some reason maybe that of harm to someone that cannot occur. Children want, again, and I've said this to parents over the years, they want two healthy, loving parents, period.
Yeah, even if they're divorced, they still want to have two parents.
And my thing to them is, if you can't have a good marriage, have a good divorce
Mm.
for the welfare and benefit of your children. That is all that they want, because we see when you talk about children being in the middle, because they figure out they've got to choose.
Yes, the
They,
loyalty
hmm
threat is
yes,
huge.
it is really,
And it's
really,
wrong for
and
any
it's
parent
wrong. It's really, really,
to tell the
it's
kid, it's me or your mother or
you
whatever.
can't do, yeah, you can't do that. So we really have to work, and we have to do a lot of work on the searching parent. Okay, just
Yeah.
imagine your child's been taken, and the child's been recovered, or children have been recovered, and you hear someone from my division saying, and by the way, excuse me, you've got to work with the taking parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet. I bet there's,
Excuse
a
me, yeah, and they're kind of
myriad.
like, what? But then they get it. They're
Yeah.
terrified. They're terrified because it's like, okay, generally when a child's recovered, they may have supervised visitation for a
Yes.
while, but then eventually, you're going to want that child to be able to have, again, access to that taking parent, and the searching parent, or the parent that now has, the physical custody, is terrified,
Great.
absolutely
S-
terrified.
So I want to move on and talk about the trainings and the meetings that you also have sponsored over the decades. You want to
Mm.
talk about that?
Over the decades, oh my gosh, yes, training is
Well,
is
it's true. I
it's
mean,
been, that's right, it's been decades. Training has been one of our really, one of the big things that we enjoy doing here and have done over the decades.
yep,
We certainly have a lot of training for law enforcement,
yep.
because we want to help them know how they can help their communities when they have missing child cases. We
Hmm.
obviously over the years have done training for prosecutors, for child welfare professionals, anybody that's going to that works in this space.
Hmm.
Certainly, some of the new trainings that we've done over the years prior COVID, we all know the autism
Mm.
situation. We have, unfortunately, when we have missing children that are on the spectrum, we sometimes don't recover those children successfully.
Mm.
Many of them are found deceased. And we've learned over the years and have trained law enforcement to understand this, that many of these children are drawn to water.
Mm.
So we want to make sure that they know immediately you need to get wherever, if there's water around, or what have you. So those are kinds of training. So we identify from working with families that there are things we need to know that are going to be helpful to the field. Then we're going to want to make sure that we can train,
Yeah, that's a new
to
piece
that.
of information for me, Marcia, about
Yes.
kids on the spectrum being drawn to
Hmm.
water. I've
Yes.
heard of trains, like a
Hmm.
obsessive, interest in trains. I've worked with a bunch of people on the spectrum because, frankly, they are easy targets online to be recruited by
Oh,
cults
oh yeah, I could
because
see
they do
that.
the love bombing online. And of course, people on the spectrum have anxiety and issues with reading social cues and having friends. So
Yes.
online, they have instant friends and then clear rules and
Hmm.
regulations of what is reality, but then they can get drawn down a slippery slope
Yeah,
into a
yeah.
authoritarian situation.
Oh, I can see it. Yes. Well, many of them, many young children, they like the water. They like
That's
the
so
water.
interesting.
Uh-huh. And it appears that it could be soothing, or
Hmm.
and so we train to that. One of the other things that we learned from a parent whose child was missing in the woods is that there was a certain rock star that this child liked. And when law
Uh-huh.
enforcement was searching for the child and calling the child's name, they were just kind of crouched somewhere.
I see.
And then they were able, the parents said, no, but they like this song. They like this song. And they played that song and were just able to blast it, into the
Smart.
area. And then the child was able to come
Wow.
forward. So those are the kind of things that we really need to have the field understand when it comes to training. My division, we have a network of therapists called the Family Advocacy Outreach Network,
Okay.
and those are therapists that we recruit throughout the country, that will work with families that we say, hey, will you work for them? Will you work with them for on a sliding fee scale, or what have you? And we have training for them. All of these people
Sure.
obviously are already licensed and are
Yep.
very good at what they do. We bring them here so we can teach them about the field of missing and exploited children.
Interesting. That's so great. So while we're talking about money, uh, it's a nonprofit, so people can donate to NCMEC, or is it federal funds, or how is the financing
And this will
arranged?
be confusing because we're actually both.
Okay.
We are a nonprofit, but we do receive funding from the Office from Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, acronyms in Washington, D.C., which
Okay.
is OJJDP, which is under the Department of Justice. And we have always, since 1984, received our funding from Justice. But the way that we were established, it allows us to be a nonprofit. So we do have a private sector side where we can indeed take, donations or grants, or, to get money that the grant
Right.
does would not cover. So
Yeah.
yes, we are
So if
able to do
anyone's
both.
listening and they are thinking about philanthropy and what can make a difference, this is an organization that's really huge in my mind in terms of the contributions that they have made and will continue to make, as a place to go to when people are worried about missing or exploited children.
Oh yes, thank you, Stephen, for that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
nice.
you're not paying me. I'm not on
No, you're
salary,
not.
we've been in touch. And I started this podcast in January, and I was thinking, who do I know whose work
Uh-huh.
I want to highlight to bring to a wider audience? And you were very high on my list, so I'm so glad we were able to find the time to do this today. So
I am too, because a lot of people, perhaps it's good, don't know who we are, because those that need us know who we are, but we want everybody to know that we're here because they may have friends, or they may,
yep.
coworker that is having some challenges and have a missing child, or a child that's run away. We want them to know that they can definitely call here, and we don't close cases. We don't
Yeah.
close cases until a child is recovered, which does bring me to another piece of work that we do,
Sure.
and that is with the
Uh-huh.
child welfare community. Many missing children, particularly children that are considered endangered runaways, are kids that are in the system.
Mm.
A lot of children that are in the system. And some years ago, there was legislation passed that said social service agencies or child welfare agencies had to report
Mm.
their missing kids that they
Yeah.
had in their care to us, which has been it's wonderful. I mean, that is a game changer, because, in child welfare, oftentimes, once the child ages out of the system, the case may be closed,
I see.
where we never close a case. We
That's
never close a case here.
that's so interesting. So let me just run a scenario that popped into my head. single parent loses a job, has health issues, becomes homeless, has one, two, or three kids,
Hmm.
then has a health crisis or something, and the kids are there with this parent, and there aren't other relatives that could step in to take the kids. Do they just get taken by foster care of the local community, or is this something that they could reach out to your agency for help?
Well, it's not anything because it's a, because it's a real kind of, it's not anything that we particularly work with or
Uh-huh.
do. Now, if one of those children, hopefully, unfortunately, will not run away, but if that were to happen,
Mm-hmm.
then of course that would be a case that we could handle. When you look at a situation like that in general, because there are
Mm-hmm.
so many cases like that, that's when the child welfare system or the system itself can really be mobilized to really help
I
that
see.
family. And the goal would always be, even with, child welfare, traditional social services as people know it, to always keep the family together.
Yes.
If at all possible,
Right.
that is always the goal, unless a child protective services worker is going to determine that maybe the child or children do not need to be in the home at that period of time. But that's never their goal. Their goal is always to keep them together by providing resources, be they financial, or emotional, or getting them connected to other providers in the
I
community that can
understand.
help with that.
I understand. So
Hmm.
we're going to wrap up soon, but and maybe I should have asked you this earlier on in our interview,
Oh, wow.
but I'm wondering if you're willing to share like a case story, a success story with our listeners.
Oh my gosh. There have been so many. I just have to
I
think
probably
of.
should have asked you in
Yeah. And like,
advance, but I'd say the first one that came to your mind would probably be
well,
fine.
I'm thinking of one where the it was an internet ended up being an international young
Hmm.
lady, teenager, was abducted by the mother's boyfriend and taken into a fairly remote area of Mexico.
Oh,
Again, she was a minor,
yeah.
and while she was there, of course, he was molesting her and
Oh,
raping
sorry.
her continually.
Mm.
She had multiple children as a result of that
Wow.
of that abduction. When she was located ultimately, and she was, shall I say, she's an adult. She was an
Right.
adult, and she has these children. So as an organization, we were able to mobilize because they were living fairly, kind of in an impoverished level.
Mm-hmm.
They had a little dog. I remember they had a little dog, and she wanted to come back home. And
Mm.
she wanted to come back home to the U.S. So we mobilized through our resources to be able to get them back,
Uh,
back here, because we do have some nice transportation resources where people will volunteer and do really wonderful things for families through grants and what have you.
yeah.
We're able to get them back. We were able to connect with a courier that deals with dogs
Mm-hmm.
to even get their because that was so much part of of
Family.
everything, as you know, to have the dog come back. Then we were able to get therapists through each part of like they came from this part of
Sure.
Mexico, then they had to come here to one airline, the airport, then they had to go to another airport, and there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
So we were able to get people, therapists that volunteered their time to be able to work at each point of entry until they got back home. That was a real
Great
it, it,
story.
it was a sad case, but it ended up being one that everybody just kind of was able to do what needed to be done.
It's a great,
After
great
she had,
story. It
yeah,
reminds me of a bunch of cases I've done over the years where the woman was impregnated by the cult leader, had a bunch of kids, and the
yes,
mother, got away from the cult. But then the kids look like the cult leader because They were his children, and just helping the mother work through that and how to
Yes, yes.
explain to the children, you know,
Hmm.
daddy's a criminal. He's in jail. You know,
It's hard stuff.
it's
It is,
very,
it is, it's really, really
it's,
hard stuff. But
it's,
we've got really nice stories,
uh,
success stories, as well. A lot of them,
you
when I think
save a
about them in
life,
the
you save
years.
the world.
No, I like that.
It's an
Yes.
old Jewish
I like
saying.
that.
It's
I like that a lot. Oh, and you know what? I've got to mention this because this is so important. We also have a program called Team Hope,
Please
and
tell us.
I want to get that, this out as well. Team Hope is a parent to parent peer support network of
Hmm.
parents that have had a missing child. The child's been recovered, may still be missing. They may have been recovered alive, they may have been recovered deceased,
Oh boy.
or exploitation. They may have, their children may have been involved, their child may have been in an exploitation case.
Yep.
They come together, they're all over the country, they're
Yep.
volunteers. They come together, they're far enough along past their victimization to be able to help another parent.
Paying it forward.
It is the only, to our knowledge, it is the only program of its sort that we're aware of in the country. It is amazing.
It's
You
so
know,
great.
how we say we don't have to have experienced a situation to be able to help someone. This appears to be one of those situations where having been through it is really important to be able to help another parent that's walking that same journey, having a missing child or a child that's been trafficked or
Same with
victimized.
cults. If somebody has a kid who,
Yeah, they
adult even, who
they
gets
know it.
into a cult, it's other parents who've been lived through the nightmare, hopefully came out the
Hmm.
other
And they
side.
know it firsthand.
Firsthand is really, really powerful. As we wrap up, Marcia, I'm remembering my last time visiting the
Hmm.
building, and I think part of a training. And you gave out a little placard,
Yeah.
luggage case that says
Yes.
National Center. It's
Hmm.
still on my briefcase that
Oh,
I
that is
bring
amazing. I'll have to send you a new
everywhere.
one.
But please send me a new one. But the point is if you have merchandise like T-shirts or hats that says NCMEC or Team Hope, or let us know, because and anyone listening that wants to support you, it's another way of getting the message out. Because people say, "Oh, what's Team Hope?" or "What's
Mhm.
NCMEC?" or "What is that?" And it has the number on it.
Well, we do have merchandise. We do have T-shirts. We do have hats. We
So we're
absolutely.
going to
Thank
do
you
a
for that.
blog based on
Okay.
this interview, and we'll add all these extra links and maybe a few
Wonderful.
pictures, um, because we want to spread awareness that we are in
Uh-huh.
this together. We're human beings, we're Americans, we're part of the world community, and end this polarization and hatred and
Oh my
fear
gosh. Yes.
that's
Yes.
gripping so many people,
Yes.
unfortunately, through bad media and social media, etc. So, with that, I'm going to thank you. Continued success, and we'll stay in touch. And as I said, we'll write up a blog and add some more links on the
Okay.
Freedom of
I
Mind
appreciate
website.
it. Thank you. Thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much.
Thanks so
Okay.
much. Take
Thanks,
care.
Al. Bye-bye.
Bye.